Did a viral mid-flight scream really expose a flight anxiety crisis? Or was it trying to create one? Airplane scream is now its own genre. Hi, I'm Justine, the nerdy half, and I am a constant traveller, more than happy on a plane. But does that mean I get to make fun of those who aren't? Flight anxiety has gained a bit of notoriety online, so I decided to dig deeper and find out why it happens and what we can actually do about it. So by the end of this video, I'll share a couple of evidence-based ways that people can help reduce their own flight anxiety and ways that the rest of us can support them along the way. Korean influencer Mia You posted a shaky flight panic post in mid-January 2026. The video hit 25 million views in 10 days, sparked 1.2 million comments, and most of them weren't very supportive. But then it came out that Mia had actually been a passenger on a flight that had some terrible turbulence. Mia herself suffered a fractured spine and PTSD, so maybe those screams weren't drama, they were trauma. Actually, later on, Mia did admit she had exaggerated to make a point, maybe. But you know what? Let's not get into that debate now. There's actually plenty of other commentary out there. What sparked my interest in the case was an article I read on an aviation news website, which pretty much leaned back on the Mia needs to learn how to control herself side of things. The article actually concluded that even though turbulence is increasing, learning how to think means learning how to control yourself. Are they implying that Mia wasn't thinking? Well, actually, when you look at the psychology behind it, they might be on the right track. Let's be clear, air travel is actually one of the safest ways to move, but fear isn't always rational. Most of us already know that, and yet when clips like this go viral, the reaction is usually not one of empathy, it's more of judgment. And perhaps that's why most travellers have learnt to suppress their fear or their anxiety. And some have been successful in learning how to manage it, and I'm going to share some tips on how to do that a little bit later in the video. Because what I found really striking is what doesn't happen. Fear doesn't stop us from flying. The research will tell you that around about 40% of people feel some kind of anxiety related to flying, and yet only a small, less than 5% of those people actually avoid flying altogether. That means that a lot of people with you on the plane are actively trying to manage their anxiety responses. And while it's tempting for the rest of us to say, look, there's nothing to worry about, fear isn't based on logic. It's driven by the amygdala, the brain's threat detection system. And during the pandemic, our amygdalas got a lot of exercise, constantly scanning for threats in a world that suddenly felt very uncertain. The pandemic was a collective trauma that left us all feeling a little bit less sure about the world. And if it wasn't enough to suddenly discover that life can change so quickly, it also impacted on our muscle memory when it came to travel. Commercial aviation has been operating for more than 100 years, and its safety record is increasingly improving every year. In relative terms, the risk is so small, it's often described as statistically negligible. According to the International Air Transport Association, the global fatality risk in commercial air flights is actually between 0.03 and 0.06 per million flights. This means you would need to fly every day for tens of thousands of years to statistically experience a fatal accident. Pre-COVID, most of us knew this just intuitively as well as through experience. We flew regularly, we experienced turbulence, we landed safely, and this built subconscious confidence. Each safe flight gives you a positive experience with turbulence and gradually rewires your brain to think of it as normal, not threatening. 3 years of near empty skies meant that most of us couldn't engage in what's called exposure therapy. So without that experience, people didn't get a chance to strengthen their reactions to fear. And so taking that first post-COVID flight just brought it all flattering back again. To add to this, news coverage at the time focused heavily on things like turbulence. even when prior to the pandemic that wouldn't have made news coverage. You don't see news stories of the safe flights. When Mia's 2024 flight resulted in a death, that got wall-to-wall news coverage, despite the 99.9999% successful flights during the period. This creates what's called availability bias. The brain overestimates the danger from turbulence because the dramatic stories have drowned out the safe ones. Another reason why Mia's posting maybe wasn't so responsible. So all of this just created a perfect storm where normal turbulence added to amplified scary stories equaled increased fear. But honestly, when you think that half the plane is experiencing anxiety, the real question isn't, well, what's their problem? It's, why am I expecting them to cope in silence on their own? Even though public discussions around anxiety have increasingly got healthier over the years, there's still a stigma around anxiety disorders. There's still a lot of reinforcing of negative stereotypes, and that discourages people from stepping up or seeking help. So even though awareness has increased, many people still feel like it's just not comfortable to express that in public. And they're kind of right, because our reaction to other people's fear is driven by psychology too. Mia's viral screaming is a good example of this. You can really see what happens around her. During Mia's video, there are no flight attendants that come in and check in on her or try to calm her in any way. They kind of seem to be ignoring her. Actually, this is textbook training. They did exactly as they were supposed to. There actually are some really compelling reasons why aircraft crew are not allowed to interfere with somebody experiencing that kind of stress. And that's because about 40% of the passengers around them are susceptible to the contagion of fear. So their visible carry on and keep calm protocol actually works for the greater good. According to the IATA, 85% of turbulence fearful passengers stay calm when they see the crew acting as business as normal. But surely as a human community, we have a responsibility to help those in need. Mia's drama aside, she looked like a person who wasn't coping. And in the video, you can see a nearby passenger reaching out to try and support her. I guess showing the difference between safety protocols and natural human empathy. But actually empathy is not the automatic response. Humans have come to expect composure in public places, and anything that threatens that puts them on a high alert. So when someone panics mid-flight, it triggers that fight or flight reaction in other passengers. And so to protect themselves, they put up their own defensive shields. We are wired to treat visible fear as a signal. Our brains instinctively perceive that there's a real threat, and so they go into self-protection mode. But because you're also in a confined space and a public place, that self-protection can look like a social response rather than a physical one. Your mind wants to push it away, reject the other person through eye-rolling, criticizing, even mocking. It's really common. If you blame them, then you can say to yourself, I am safe, it wouldn't happen to me. So when other passengers don't offer comfort, this is a mix of self-protection, social conditioning, and their own emotional regulation. Later on in the video, I'm going to give you some tips to help with this too, because our response is also just a human reaction, not a moral failure. And once we know this, we can learn to overcome it. Because if we expect somebody who's gripped in fear, whose amygdala has taken control, to somehow reverse that and take control of themselves, then we also have to take responsibility for our responses. Now, full disclosure, I love flying, and when there's turbulence, I just treat it like a roller coaster. I love them too. So I haven't actually tried any of these strategies myself in that situation. However, I have tried them to support my daughter, who does experience anxiety during flying. She's the total opposite to me when it comes to getting on a plane. From the moment she was a small child, as soon as we get near the check-in, I would hear her little voice, "Mummy, I feel sick." And this is long before boarding. It's the lead up to the flight that starts to cause her anxiety. The build up, the security lines, the pre-flight boarding, all that pre-flight tension. Once we get on the flight, she's already tense. But to this day, she's a regular flyer just like me because she has built some strategies. She's in her mid-20s now and she says the anxiety is still there, but it's so much more manageable now. And here's some of the solutions that worked for her. Now there are a lot of strategies out there, but I've nailed it down to the top 3 that have been proven to work based on psychological principles. If you combine all 3, you'll be able to create your own little Conquer My Fear course. But remember, I'm not a specialist, and if you suffer from full-on aviophobia, then you need to go to an expert. I've put a list in the description that'll help you work out, is this something I can try and approach on my own, or is this something I need more help with? So the first one is exposure therapy, gradual and systematic desensitization. As we saw from the COVID backtrack, exposure to something is really important to help get a realistic understanding of it. So to get back your confidence, you need to feel the fear and do it anyway, as they say. But there's a particular way to approach this that will make it more successful. Always start off small. Just expose yourself to really low intensity flight related experiences. Even start by watching videos of planes taking off and landing safely. Or try listening to the noise of airplane takeoff. Sometimes just the noise is a trigger, so if you desensitize yourself to that, that's a good way to start. If you're lucky, you might be able to find yourself a stationary plane to sit in, or a VR, a virtual reality experience just to try out. Then gradually start to increase your exposure. Just come out to the airport and watch the planes come in and out. Spend some time in an airport terminal, even when you're not flying, just so you get used to that buzz around you. Did you know that airports are actually designed to make you walk faster because they want you to get through all the lines quicker? They purposely design the carpet and the way that they paint the walls to point you in a certain direction and make you just keep going, just keeping that heart rate flowing. Okay, so this airport is calm. We have the advantage of a very small airport out in beautiful nature. One of the benefits of living in small city New Zealand. The key to success with this is repeated exposure. The more your brain experiences flying as safe, the more your anxiety responses are going to reduce over time. And you need to combine your exposure with the relaxation techniques, and I'm going to give you some examples of these in a minute. Try a few different techniques until you find the self-calming strategy that works for you. And when you practice those during your exposure therapy, your brain associates flying with becoming calm rather than becoming anxious. Exposure therapy is going to help you with your physical responses. To be really successful, most people combine this with CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, and this helps you focus on your thought processes. If your anxiety mostly comes from overwhelming worries or negative thoughts, then you probably want to start the CBT. There are plenty of trained CBT specialists out there who can help you, but I will give you some of the basics. One of the first steps is to actually specifically identify the negative thought that you are having. Capture it, write it down in words. Once it's written down, it's much easier to then challenge rationally and replace it with something more realistic. Approach it like a game, a kind of debate with your own mind. Do the research and debate against yourself. Please make sure you find reliable research, evidence and statistics. I know that's increasingly hard to do these days, but if you find that hard data, it really can help. I once read a study that said that 97% of survivors of airplane crashes were wearing a seatbelt and knew where the exits were. So that's always the first thing I do once I sit down. Seatbelt on, and I count the number of rows ahead or behind me to the nearest exit. As soon as that's done, I'm ready to relax. Positive affirmations have also been proven to help. It does work best when these are your own authentic voice, not something you've read in a meme. Tell yourself positive things that are true for you, like I've been in a tough situation before, I handled that, I can handle this as well. For me, I like to remember that the pilot wants to get home safely to their family too, so I'm happy to put my trust in them. With the exposure therapy and the CBT, you also need to find your own relaxation techniques. There's a myriad of them out there. I'm going to give you a few that work for me and my daughter. But the key is you need to practice a range and find what works for you first before you get into the situation when you need them, so that you get them into a kind of muscle memory and they become an automatic response, rather than you trying to think about what your relaxation techniques are when your brain is in a mode that it can't actually think. So the most common, of course, is deep breathing. This works physically because it calms down your heart rate. You inhale slowly through your nose for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and then exhale slowly for 6 seconds. You always want to make the exhale slightly longer than the inhale. When I teach this kind of breathing to kids, there's 2 techniques that they really like. One's called balloon belly and the other is hot chocolate. So here you want to imagine there's actually a balloon in your belly and you're blowing it up and letting it out. Imagining the balloon is in there gives you something to visualize, and so that keeps your brain busy while you're focusing on that breathing as well. Hot chocolate's a fun one too. So basically you just pretend you have a cup of hot chocolate in your hands and you inhale the smell of the hot chocolate and blow on it softly to cool it down. But visualizing that hot chocolate's really important because, again, it gives you that distraction in your brain while you're using the breathing to calm down the heart. Another relaxation technique that works is called progressive muscle relaxation, and that's where you go through each of your muscles one by one and really just focus on those little muscles, tightening and then relaxing them one at a time. You could start from your toes and work all the way up. And you're just imagining each muscle in your mind's eye, visualize it tightening and then relaxing, and go up your body very slowly. Mindfulness is another great one that my daughter and I used to do a lot. This is where using your senses, your 5 senses, can help you focus on what's happening around you without judgment. You just want to name out loud 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch physically or feel on your body, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And here it actually helps to bring a friend and let them know what your relaxation techniques are. If you've already flipped over into your fight, flight, or freeze mode, they might be still in their rational mode and be able to talk you through the technique. If you are flying on your own, it is important to let the attendant know as you enter the plane. Just very quickly say, look, I sometimes get a bit anxious on flights, but I have some strategies and I'll be fine. This just lets them know, just to keep you in their periphery, but it also reinforces in your mind that you are fine, you have prepared. Preparation is really important. Planning ahead and choosing your seats in advance just takes one more thing off that list of things you have to worry about. And some people find checking the turbulence on that particular route in advance is helpful too. And there's an app that will do this for you. I've popped it in the description below. But above all, staying hydrated is really super important. And that means avoiding caffeine and alcohol. Now, personally, I do love a glass of red wine when I'm on a plane. And I always tell myself it helps me relax, but actually alcohol increases your anxiety symptoms. And of course, if you've started to do a bit of your exposure therapy, you'll know that you'll need to create your own calming environment on a plane because it's not going to necessarily deliver calm. So you want to bring some noise cancelling headphones maybe, or have downloaded an app on your phone with some calming techniques or meditation. Apps like Headspace or Calm are designed to reduce anxiety. I haven't used them and I'm not sponsored by any of them, so I can't make recommendations. If anyone out there has got any good recommendations for us, please leave it in the comments. When you're planning ahead, you also want to plan your own little comfort zone with maybe your favorite scarf or pillow and your own distractions that you know are going to work for you. So my daughter likes to plan out the time of the flight based on the number of movies she's going to watch and the sequence she's going to watch them in. Some airline flights will give you an app in advance where you can plan that out before you even get on the plane. On other flights, it's quite useful to spend that time planning out what you're going to do in those hours during takeoff, so you've got something else to focus on. If you're a reader, you might want to challenge yourself, right, I'm going to get through this many chapters. Or for me, it would be, I'm going to solve this many Sudoku puzzles. Something you've got to focus on that's a wee challenge or competition with yourself just to keep you occupied. My daughter also says she always brings something she can chew on. That's just one more thing that keeps her occupied and it stops her ears from popping. So it's just one thing she knows that she's planned for and is in her little grab bag of self-calming techniques. So those are some of the things that you can do to help yourself prepare for flight anxiety or self-regulation while you're on the plane. But wouldn't it be nice to think that your fellow passengers would be there to support you, just in case your amygdala does take control? For those of us who are comfortable on a flight, here's a few things we can do to help support others. First, and this is important, you are not responsible for anybody else's panic or safety. You put your safety first and the flight attendants are there to look after everybody else. But there are ways you can support people who are in need. One of the most helpful things you can do is just not react. Just like fear is contagious, so is calm. Staying calm, keeping your own body language relaxed and not drawing attention to the person who might be suffering anxiety, that just sends a subtle message of safety. When someone else's amygdala is firing, just seeing other people calm can help their brain recalibrate. So this is not you ignoring the situation, it's you actively controlling your own responses so you can spread contagious calm. If it feels appropriate and safe, you can try some simple reassurances. Remember, this isn't the time for logistics and facts. The rational side of the brain isn't engaged, so they're not really interested in those kinds of arguments. You really just want to confirm your presence and your support. Say things like, you are not alone. I'll be here with you. You're going to be okay. This is going to pass. Trust me, that's a lot more effective than telling somebody they're overreacting or giving them the stats on flight safety. Fear isn't a failure of character, it's a biological response. The amygdala doesn't care about viral videos, social expectations, or how composed we think we should be. It just reacts to real or just perceived threats. That's its job. And we should actually be grateful that it does so automatically. Maybe the real takeaway from all these viral airplane screen videos isn't about who behaved badly and who should be doing better, but just a reminder that fear, like flying, is something we do together. And on that note, I'd like to thank you for staying with me throughout this whole video. And especially a huge thank you to all my subscribers who have stuck with me throughout my bumpy journey in YouTube. And a big shout out to my daughter Kat, who helped me with this video, but has also been my emotional support person throughout that whole turbulent YouTube journey. I've no idea where the journey will take me next week, but wherever it is, I hope you'll be there with me. Until then, happy travels everyone.